turtle power is forever, baby. What is up, guys, and welcome to my review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Probably in the running for the longest title of a movie this year. So for a little backstory, I'm a lifelong Turtles fan. I grew up on the 80s cartoon, the 90s live action movies, yes, even the third one. And like everybody else, I have seen the Ninja Turtles brand go on in many different iterations to varying degrees of quality. You know, the live action movies that we got, the Michael Bay produced films, I didn't think they were terrible, but they definitely missed the mark on quite a few things. And even some of the things that they started to show some success with in Out of the Shadows, by then, nobody had any faith after that first film. And once I started hearing rumblings about this movie, you know, the fact that it was animated kind of took a little of the wind out of my sails. I really long for another great live action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles property, but nonetheless, you could do a lot of things with animation. Started seeing names attached to it, like Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg were the ones kind of pushing it into fruition, and whether or not you like their style of comedy or not, they are very successful producers. Started seeing some of the cast get rounded out in the voice acting and the art direction. A lot of things about this intrigued me. So I got a chance to check out a sneak preview screening in Jacksonville this past weekend. I took both of my daughters to go and check it out, and they are kind of newer Ninja Turtles fans, especially my 6-year-old. This was the second thing that she had seen, because I did show her the 1990 movie first, like a good parent should. And so the question is this a shepherding in a new era of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles glory? Is this something that can appeal to the old school fans as well as bring in a lot of new fans? Or is it yet another divisive entry in this franchise? Starting off with the positives, I think this is probably the best and the most fun iteration that I have seen of the Ninja Turtles since those first two movies in the 90s. You can tell that Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg and everybody else and the production side of this movie really gets Ninja Turtles, and they understand the appeal of Ninja Turtles and why it has been this long-standing property that generations after generations have loved. And I think they understood where some of the previous iterations went wrong, and you see a lot of getting back to the glory days with the direction that they take the characters and the story and really building those relationships, going into the origins a little bit, but not bogging the movie down with origins, because we all understand at this point how the Ninja Turtles became the mutants that they were, and takes it in some new directions that, while I think will be divisive for some, myself included, we'll get into it, is definitely some interesting directions to go to make this stand out from all the other iterations that we've gotten over the past couple decades. There's a really fun energy to the movie. The charisma and the relationships between the characters, all of the chemistry between all the voice acting is really good. There's some genuinely good jokes and comedy throughout the movie. There's a couple of running gags that paid off really well in the third act, and it takes a lot to get me to audibly chuckle in a theater, and more than a few times I did here. And it's also a nice balance of very kid-centric humor and sight gags, while also having just enough of an adult spin to where us parents that are taking our kids out can also be along for the ride and enjoy our own brand of humor in the movie.
Really sorry, Splinter. Some of the guys wanted to get pizza and I tried to talk them out of it.
You ratted us out.
Hey, don't use that word that way.
I mean, it's 2023.
Sorry, Dad.
And what I think this iteration captured that maybe even the best iterations of the past never really spent too much time on is this very childlike curiosity of the Ninja Turtles. These mutants that have all of these human emotions and these human desires and these human tendencies, but are animals, are mutants, are, you know, monsters to some, that are forced to live underground in the sewers, but they want to come out and they want to be accepted by society. They want to be a part of everyone else. They want to be treated like the sentient beings that they are. And we've always kind of caught up with the Turtles at a point in their story to where they've kind of just accepted things for how they are. And this is the first time where you get to really see the younger age Turtles wondering why the world is the way that it is and what they need to do to make it better and to fix that. As far as voice acting, I thought everybody did a great job. You're gonna recognize a lot of voices here. Some of them are just for smaller roles, but the two standouts for me absolutely was Jackie Chan as Splinter and Ice Cube as Superfly. Now, Ice Cube is kind of just a persona in and of himself, and for the most part, the vast majority of his roles, he's kind of just that Ice Cube persona, and that kind of carries over here, but I think that Ice Cube persona was perfect for Superfly. Just that snark and that meanness and that aggression that he brings in such a fun and charming way was perfect for that character.
6 in the morning, police at my door.
And I was actually surprised how much I really grew to love Jackie Chan's version of Splinter. There was a few things in the first 2 acts that I was like, I don't know if I'm vibing with this version of Splinter. I don't know if that's the version of Master Splinter that I want. And by the 3rd act, they completely won me over by subverting a few of my expectations, by surprising me with a few things that I felt were lacking in the first 2 acts. And he just brought a lot of heart. He brought that very father overprotection love that has certainly been there in previous iterations, but it's at its strongest in this version. I also love the animation style. Now again, you guys that have watched me for a while know that I am extreme hit or miss with animation. I'm one of those boring adults that just feels like they've kind of aged out of appreciating a lot of cartoons, and there's few exceptions. One earlier this year, of course, was Spider-Verse. I think this movie gives Spider-Verse a run for its money. Now there's a lot of things about Spider-Verse that are infinitely more impressive with just the different art styles, but the art style they chose here was very unique and it was very cool and it fit the Turtles to where it's kind of this mix between hand-drawn and computer-generated animation. Some of it almost looks purposely unfinished, like some of the effects, like when there's cell phone rings, you get like these little squiggle lines, and it's very primitive art direction, but it totally works for the style and for the tone of this movie. And so even on just an animation front, this movie was very fun to watch and to look at. And finally, not long ago, they announced that this is actually going to be a kickoff for not only a future film, but also a Paramount Plus Ninja Turtles series. And I think this movie succeeds really well at being the first movie and telling a complete story, coming to a satisfying conclusion for one movie, while also acting as somewhat of a pilot for that Paramount Plus series. I could see that series very easily going into a lot of the more small-scale stories and a lot of the more teenage aspects of these characters. And then when we finally catch up with them with whatever the Mutant Mayhem sequel is, then we're probably going to get the bigger events, the bigger villains, the bigger scale. And if they play their cards right, I think they could actually have a really nice, successful new generation of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for all of the kids that are walking into this movie today. Moving on to the mixed, there's only one thing that it wasn't necessarily a negative on my experience. It was just something that bugged me slightly, and I'm curious if anybody else felt this way. And part of it's because of the previous iterations of these characters that I just kind of have this image in my head, or this certain expectation for the voice and personalities of the Turtles. I kind of felt like the voice acting and the personality of Donatello and Michelangelo in this movie were backwards. Like, Donatello has easily the most childlike, younger brother, higher-pitched adolescent personality and voice of the 4 Turtles here, and Michelangelo had a lot more of a mature voice and a bit deeper voice, and to me it just felt like those two were backwards. Michelangelo to me has always been like the younger brother of the 4 and the party guy and the immature one and the fun one, and whereas like the opposite, Raphael's always kind of felt like the bigger brother and had the deeper voice and the more mature one and kind of a little bit more aggression. Like, there's just certain things, there's certain flavors to the voice acting and to the personalities of these Turtles that I feel like are integral, and just slightly those two felt off to me. Now moving on to the negatives, as a longtime Turtles fan, there were a couple of creative decisions, namely with a few of the classic Ninja Turtles villains here that I didn't necessarily like. Now, I want to see more in this universe before I really stomp my feet into the ground and, plant my feet in the sand and say that I don't like this direction, but without giving anything away, there's a couple of classic Ninja Turtle villains that aren't villains at all in this iteration. They're actually cool with the Turtles. And there was another classic Ninja Turtles villain that is on screen for like 2 minutes, and that's it. That character's now gone. And I was like, but no. Now again, newer generation, fresh ideas, taking it in a new direction, totally appreciate all that. I think they do a really good job at setting up all of that, but longtime Turtles fans, there's a couple things here that are going to be a little confusing. I kind of like my Ninja Turtles stories to be a bit more ground level, a bit more small scale, you know, the Foot, Shredder, some of these classic villains have always been more ground level villains. I've never really liked some of the larger scale stuff like Krang and anything alien or anything massive, and if you've seen the trailers, you know there's a bit of a kaiju aspect to a villain at the end of the film, and while it's fun, and I think it works, especially in animation when you can get away with doing so much more and have it feel real and plausible, I just tend to like the smaller scale, ground level, maybe even a little bit darker version of the Turtles versus such spectacle and such fantasy and science fiction side of things. So that's just a me thing. And the only other negative, and this is very small, this is a very minute issue for me. I've seen so many people praising this movie and celebrating the fact that they finally nailed the teenage aspect. They finally put the teenage into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We've never seen that before. I don't know if I would fully agree with the argument that we've never seen it before, but my issue with this iteration is that to me they still feel a little too young in their personalities. Now, maybe I was just mature for my age, but these turtles are supposed to be 15 years old in this movie, and to me they had the personalities of 12-year-olds. Now that's fine. I like the fact that we get the younger versions of these turtles and that innocent kind of curiosity that I was talking about, but when you tell me they're 15-year-olds, that didn't quite line up for me. With all that being said though, guys, I had a great time with this. There's very few animation movies a year that I genuinely come out and wanting to watch that movie again as soon as possible. My girls had a really good time with it. My son, who's a big Ninja Turtles fan, hasn't even seen it yet, so I look forward to checking it out with him. If you're a longtime Turtles fan, you're definitely going to enjoy a lot about this movie. If you're a brand new, bringing your kids in for their first experience, they're going to have a really good time with it. This is definitely one of those movies of the summer to take your family out to see. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews, and I'm also going to put my June movies ranked because I'm getting ready to do my July movies ranked here in a couple of days, as well as a Ninja Turtles ranking is an idea that I want to explore too. No promises, but I do want to do that. Like, share, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss those videos, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.